All right, guys, welcome to Unit 6, Part 1. This is it. You made it. This is the last unit for the class. So by the time you're watching this, it's probably Sunday. This is a Wednesday I'm recording on. So final hasn't been written yet. I'll be writing it after I do all these recordings. And the final's only covering Units 5 and 6. That's it. How many questions? I'm still thinking between 30 and 40, though, but you'll see it when you get there. It'll be similar to the midterm, won't be exactly the same. Obviously, I am going to change a few things up for some reasons here and there, so don't worry about it. Won't be too crazy. So, without further ado, guys, let's get into this. So, here's what I'm going to cover in this part of Unit 6. We're talking about security and monitoring. So, the overview is network and system security best practices, virtualization security measures, security implications, and directory services, and monitoring techniques for networks, systems, and virtual performance. Also, there will be no labs this week. I forgot to mention that right before I read this. There's no labs. I just want you guys to take the final, and that's it. I want to make your life easy. So I figured, hey, no labs. And for this kind of stuff, fortunately, we'll be writing a lot more stuff. And I can't really give you guys labs on the stuff in the sense of, in your virtual machine, implement, like a higher level firewall, stuff like that. No, that's kind of paid software, which we don't have access to on top of it. So I'd rather not have you guys write more paperwork. I'd rather have you guys just take the final and just have a somewhat easier class. That's how I'm thinking. So let's dive into this. So network and system security best practices. Security response technologies are improving, thanks in part to innovations in areas such as machine learning and automation. However, cyber criminals are equally adept at exploiting technical advances for their own interests. You always hear about a hack every now and then. I keep bringing up NGM because it's the most recent big one. There was another one recently happening in Texas that froze like half of the healthcare departments, stuff like that. It's more commonplace, unfortunately. That's what's going to wind up happening. Sorry, I had an itch there. As this stuff just keeps evolving, it's always like a ladder. You'll bring it up to here, and then the criminal goes here, you go here. It's always going to be doing that. Even a teeter totter, if you know what that is, a back and forth slide, or a pendulum, I guess, if you want to look at it that way too. That's just how stuff's always going to be. Unfortunately, you have to stay one step ahead of them, or they're one step ahead of you. So this makes it crucial for enterprises to have all their bases covered with best practices to ensure they have the appropriate policies, methodologies, and procedures in place to maintain a strong defense against threats. So I'm going to break them up bit by bit. So we're talking about networking, we'll talk about a little prior after that, and then system security after that. Sorry. So that's going to be the majority of it for this part of Unit 1 or Unit 6. Rather, it's going to be, there's 3 parts to it. I'm going to talk about all 3 parts separately, not all as one whole. You'll see some of the stuff applies to all of it in general, not just that specific thing I talk about. But when I say apply it to VMs and systems, it's about the same. You just can't technically physically touch the VM, right? So to this end, most effective IT organizations adopt network security best practices to maximize the effectiveness of their security and protect their assets. That's the point of security, right? You want to protect your stuff. Following 10 essential best practices every organization should use to safeguard their enterprises today. So I might take the 10 part out because there are 10 of them, but I put 10, 1, 2, 3, and all that jazz. So you're going to see a lot of this going forward. So audit the network and check security controls. Knowledge is essential in maintaining security environment. So the reason you do audits, guys, segueing off the part just in the beginning, is because you have to get audited. You have to check your stuff. It's like when you go to the doctor, they don't just tell the doctor, hey, doctor, my knee hurts. Okay, here's some pills. No, they run some tests. They might put you through an MRI or an X-ray. This is essentially kind of what you're doing for your network. You're checking everything. Check security controls. Do a pen test. Hire a red team. You have a white team defending, stuff like that. That's what this is in essence referencing. Is you got to test your stuff, stress your stuff, see if it works. To have an accurate perspective on the security position of a given enterprise, the IT organization needs to run an audit of the network. By auditing, IT professionals can accomplish the following: identify potential vulnerabilities that need to be corrected, find unused or unnecessary applications running in the background that can be eliminated, like legacy software. You don't need any more services that are no longer needed because that person retired or whatnot. Like, for example, we had mainframes where I work at, right? The person that retired was actually my neighbor, oddly enough. But once he retired, they retired the machine, and now we don't have mainframes anymore because we don't use them. So why would we have kept the mainframe running around if it could have been a security hole? It's not needed. We don't run it. It's all virtualized stuff now, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of what that's referencing. So determine the strength of the firewall on currency of its settings. You just pen test it and try to ping a bunch of ports and break into a bunch of ports. That's the red team's job. If you are curious about red team, I can talk about it separately with you guys. Send me a message. We can have a whole discussion if you want. It's not stuff I do, but it's ethical hacking is the best way I can describe it. Look it up if you're curious. It's pretty interesting stuff. Measure the state of the network servers, gear, software, and applications. See how well they respond to conflict or whatever have you, break in, confirm the overall efficacy of the security infrastructure, and judge the status of the server backups. So you deploy some server backups to a virtual environment to test them, see if they come back up, are they damaged, are they corrupted, are they working, things like that. So that's the whole point of an audit. Just test everything, right? Stress everything and see how good you get. If it works or it doesn't work, does it pass, does it fail, what can we improve on? And like I've said before, guys, I'm going to mention it again. You can never prevent 100% of risk. There's always going to be a risk no matter what you do. So, and not saying risk that you're going to get hurt in industry, there's always risk. You can't 100% cover everything in the sense of, I can secure my garage, I can put a lock on it, I can put a deadbolt on it, but the door is still there, right? Someone can kick the door in, someone can axe the door, and someone can drive a car through the door, and now they're in the garage. That's what I'm kind of trying to explain to you, is that no matter how much preventative maintenance you do, something can still go wrong no matter what, unfortunately, but that's just a fact of life. So I reiterate that a lot, probably because it's just something that's stuck with me, and it's the truth. Because you can plan for anything, but if something happens, you got to figure it out. So let's talk about another one. Let's talk about revisit and communicate security policies. So policies are kind of annoying because a policy is very boring to read, and no one likes to read boring stuff, right? I mean, if you're having trouble falling asleep, go bust out the California Guide for Miniature Golf Building Codes, and you will knock that within 15 minutes, because that's some really dry stuff. So unfortunately, we kind of run into that in the IT world too. Like, there's policies in place. They're called SOPs, or standard operating procedures. You'll learn that more down the line, not in here. But you kind of got to check, okay, are they in line with what we need? Do we need to update them? Do we need to inform people not to do this anymore? What if they change that? If you bring your cell phone, it can't be on the work network, and people are still doing it. How are they going to know if you don't tell them? That's also about communication. Believe it or not, communication is very key. Also, is customer service, which unfortunately I don't get too much into here. But having a pragmatic and valid security policy is essential to ensure a strong security posture. Too often, organizations fail to review policies to make sure they address current business operational requirements and security conditions. And unfortunately, too often, enterprises fail to communicate these policies to both IT staff and, when applicable, end users. Organizations like the SANS Institution publish reference documents that IT pros can use as they re-examine and update policies, such as having a formal directive or instituting an executive change. An executive change would be like, you can't bring your own device anymore, or we're only allowing remote on one day because not enough resources, stuff like that. That's what they're talking about. So let's go on to the next one. It's still under networking, okay? No, backup data and institute a recovery plan. Unfortunately, enterprises are operating in a threat environment where the question isn't if, but when their environments are going to be breached. That's why, like I said, you can't prevent 100% of risk. Facing this reality means it is critical to back up both operationally important and highly sensitive data. As ransomware attacks become more threatening, effective organizations across industries is equally important to have within your network security best practices, a recovery strategy that minimizes downtime and limits costs. I talked about that before in Unit 5, and just to reiterate that, college around here named Rio Hondo got hit recently with ransomware, like I think a month and a half ago around the semester started, and they're barely recovering against the end of it, semester-wise for them. So it's pretty rough. So, you got to have a plan in place for when stuff like this happens. Is you have a cold site, you have a hot site, do you have only mirrors? How you have it backed up? Was that corrupted, or is that corrupted? Is that breached too? Because if they get that, then you're really dead in the water because you have no backup. So let's go on to the next one. Encrypt critical data. Data encryption is another vital element in protecting an organization's most valuable and sensitive information. IT organizations need to periodically assess data classifications and employ encryption when appropriate, where appropriate. When or where kind of works. It's interchangeable net, because like student records aren't actually encrypted the way you think they are. They're encrypted through a different program. It's not what you think. I guarantee you, your student record here at Merced is encrypted with a different kind of encryption that we don't use outside of Merced. That's how it should be. I'm hoping it is. VPNs can provide earlier protection for employees who have access to sensitive files from remote locations. That's just a virtual tunnel that goes straight to where it needs to go. You can use VPNs for that reason. And then another one, we're still going, guys. We're getting there. So update anti-malware software. Out-of-date antivirus or anti-malware software is one of the most common gaps in enterprise security. It's also one of the easiest to address. Security professionals should do periodic checks on their anti-malware software, ensuring all devices are running the most up-to-date security software. IT should also automate its patch management whenever possible. Normally, patch management that's done on the weekend when nobody's there. It just deploys automatically and updates. Updates in sense of catalogs, like they can scan and they figure out, oh, this new thing got added or this new virus came out. That kind of happens every 2 days, and they get pushed out across everything on that network, and they don't take up much space. It's the bigger things when they have a big software update. That's what you have to plan for the malware side of things. So, set appropriate access controls and employ multi-factor authentication. Effective access management starts with having the correct policies in place to dictate which users and devices have the right of entry to which resources, aka use the domain, right? Use the appropriate domain with authentication. We talked about domain a little bit. Employ access management systems and privilege access control to who can retrieve information is essential. Effective password management is also part of network security best practice. Passwords need to be at least 10 characters in length and change frequently. They change every 2 months, 3 months. It's now the standard or less. Some do it every month. Excuse me. Users would find annoying, but how secure can you want to be? Password management systems can help simplify the process. Multi-factor authentication is another important tool validating that only the proper user has access to proper resources. So we have something like that where at work, we don't have we do have multi-factor for when you're outside, but inside we have something that's called an elevation tool. So a regular user, like let's say somebody in administration is what I meant to say, like admin and records is what I'm getting at. And they need to elevate to install like a counseling version of software so they can access transcripts because they're encrypted. They would, run the elevator, the Windows prompt will come up and then prompt, hey, contact your IT department to generate a code. They will contact one of us. We'd approve the temporary elevation to administrator, so you can just install software. It only works for that instance, but like to launch the software, then it stops. The administrator writes. Well, not really. It's still running for that program, but nothing else. And once we approve it, we hit OK and we log it. And that's what they're kind of referencing in that. So it's not too shabby. There's more tools in the world now. So establish and communicate a secure governance structure. Compliance doesn't necessarily equate to security, but it can provide important guidance on how to safeguard against risks. Regulatory bodies such as the Internal Organization of Standards, IOS, and the Payment Card Industry Secure Standard Protocol, PCISSC, that's the acronym, outline the importance of establishing an organization that specifies who is responsible for managing security and responding to cybersecurity events. IT organizations need to define the respective responsibilities individuals have in managing risk and reacting to incidents. Performing periodic risk assessment can help organizations prioritize vulnerability, remediation, and minimize downtime. So here's another big one a lot of you probably haven't thought of. Educate end users. An era when phishing attacks are a preferred methodology of many cyber attacks, raising end user awareness is critical. So segueing out of this for a second, but still talking about phishing. How many guys, I know you can't show hands, but I'll give you an example. You probably get those emails and we're saying, apply for this position now, work from home, dog walker, or what's the other one I've seen recently? Research for class, this and that, $500 a week. Those are phishing attacks. They're trying to get information from you so they can pretend to be you and request more things. In a 2017 survey of corporate employees conducted by Dell, more than 75% admitted that they would willingly share confidential data under certain circumstances. End users have a propensity to fall prey to certain types of attacks that mimic normal communications. And as cyber criminals become more adept at using email and other form factors to closely mirror professional interactions, the likelihood of a staff member succumbing to the threat increases. To keep employees informed about the evolving threat environment and associated corporate security policies, end user education should be an ongoing process that is intricate part of the company's culture. So unfortunately, not a lot of people read the emails that we send up for this stuff, and some do and some get it, some don't. Sadly, and well, unfortunately, is what it is. You can't just make everyone read it, and you can't force them. But they learn their lesson when something goes wrong. Guarantee you that much. Having a maintenance system security infrastructure. IT organizations should approach security as a continuous effort that requires ongoing checks to make sure all systems and controls are working properly. As a result, businesses must have procedures in place to ensure that infrastructure is up to date and in good operating order. Security systems may be monitored and adjusted when incidents occur. Finally, IT organizations should adopt mechanisms that approve and communicate changes in security policies and practices, normally through email, where we talk about it. And here's another big one. Stay informed. Stay on top of these things because these things are always changing. It's always evolving, unfortunately. So, what you know today might not be the same tomorrow. Maybe that's not how they handle ransomware anymore. Maybe that's not how they handle, I don't know, a man-in-the-middle attack anymore. Just things will change. I mean, handle a certain way still, but that's what I'm saying. Like SQL injection, how do we deal with it if it's changing or evolving into now it's macro injection in Excel books? Something can become breached like that. How do you respond to it? Okay. One overarching requirement is to establish network security best practices is to treat the discipline as an ongoing effort. This extends to staying on top of changes in the threat environment. That means security staffers and IT pros need to understand how cyber attacks are adjusting their methods. Attackers, sorry. They must also keep up to date about advances in threat identification and mitigation. The goal should be to apply learnings from the past instance to limit negative effects from future events. All right, guys, let's get into virtual security measures here. Let me get some water, though. Be right back. All right. So, is virtualization a security risk? Yes. Yes, it is. That's why it's in bold too. But no, it is. I mean, you got to treat it like a real machine regardless of it, even though you can't physically touch it. It's not tangible. You can't type on it technically, or physically go poke it like it was a tower under you or something. But it's still on your screen. It's still a machine, regardless within a machine, right? So virtualization has some clear security advantages when compared to traditional server infrastructure. These advantages include the improved ability that come with virtual machines, the isolation of these virtual machines from the operating system and physical hardware they run on, and the enhanced security tools that come with most virtualization solutions. However, this improved security posture doesn't mean that virtualization has no security risks. The fact that many businesses employ this technology make it a valid target for hackers and other malicious actors. It's safe to say that virtualization is no more or less of a security risk than other parts of your information technology infrastructure, and with increased adoption comes the need for awareness of the potential issues that IT administrators may face. So let's dive into this. And by the way, there's only 36 slides. We're almost halfway. So some of the primary security challenges in virtualization include VM escape attacks. In this scenario, a malicious actor gains access to one of the virtual machines and uses vulnerabilities in the virtualization layer to break out and gain unauthorized access to the underlying host system or other VMs. VM escape attacks can have catastrophic consequences, compromise the entire virtualized environment. So what they mean is they essentially can, they break in, capture one machine, and then they somehow figure out a way to tunnel from that machine to the main physical host machine that's near you or in the server room or wherever you guys have it. And then they can control that. So how do that can be very catastrophic, because then they can just destroy everything or steal information or what have you, or just spy on whatever people are doing. Unauthorized access. Virtualization environments often have multiple users, including administrators, developers, and end users, who require varying levels of access. Failure to control access effectively can lead to data breaches and other security incidents. That's pretty straightforward. I don't need to hopefully give you guys an example of that right now. If you're confused about unauthorized access, message me and I can explain it a little better than I just said, but it's that definition's like spot on. So we're still talking about virtualization, okay? Data leakage. Data leakage can occur if sensitive information is not properly isolated or encrypted within VMs, or if VMs are not adequately secured. Leaked data can result in reputational damage or regulatory fines. So the thing about that one is, how many of you heard about, this database got leaked or that database got leaked because you're using a simple password? Like, if you Google it, I'm sure you can pull articles that happened like a month ago or 3 months ago. That's more common now because people do forget to change the keys. It's like having the the mat that says administrator, and under it, it's like see-through. You see the key, it says administrator key. Password, username admin, password admin. That's essentially what kind of happens with this stuff. And people can exploit it, or they do what's called a brute force attack, or they do a phishing attack and gain, access from a user's account or what have you. And, that's what can happen with it. And with data leaks, they're going to be more and more common, sadly. Like, I get emails like, hey, we've detected this data leak. I'm like, cool. Now there's going to be a lawsuit. I get like $20 or whatever. It's like, great. Now the information's somewhere on the internet. Let me change all my passwords again. It's unfortunately become more common. I'm not trying to sound too negative about it, because it does suck, but it's just a fact of life nowadays. So information is power, guys. Resource exhaustion. Malicious. Why am I rolling my OUS? Anyways, or misconfigured VMs can consume excessive resources, lead to resource exhaustion attacks. These attacks can disrupt the performance and ability of other VMs, impacting business operations. So what that means is, how you guys are messing with settings. I know some of you put that in the discussions, like, I was using too much RAM or using too many CPUs, my PC froze, my laptop froze, or got really slow. Imagine that, but with every VM that you have, like on this place you're working, like say it's 12 VMs, and they all get maxed out for memory and they all get maxed out for RAM on the host machine. Yeah, you're gonna have bad news bears and a bad day when that happens. And it's that's what a resource exhaustion attack is. I hope that makes sense. You make a correlation from what I'm saying. So let's keep going. So we talked about security measures, and we've talked about what could happen. Now let's talk about how we address those. So isolation and segmentation for virtual machines. Sorry. Isolation and segmentation. Isolate VMs from one another and from the host system to prevent lateral movement of threats. Implement network segmentation to control traffic flow. So you can isolate VMs, I don't have you guys do this because you need to do all these labs with it. You remote into it, you share files between it, you log in as other people, you kick people out. Like, you wouldn't be able to do that if it was isolated. But in real world, like, not just class, I'm talking about, like, when you're working or wherever you decide to go wind up and work with this stuff, if you like it or not, you would implement this kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. So patch management, maintain an up-to-date inventory of virtualization components and regularly apply security patches and updates. Plan like once every 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Access controls, implement role-based control, RBAC, to restrict access to virtualized resources and based on the job roles and responsibilities. So like I've said before, would accounting need access to stuff from HR? Would HR need access to stuff from research? Would research need access to stuff like from the president's office? Or I'm trying to think of another one I can think of off the top of my head, like marketing. Who gets what is kind of where you want to be. Like, as an administrator, you would have the overall view of everything and access to change and edit things. Cool, but would the cafeteria lady hypothetically need that role on the computer she logs into just to input how much? I sold we made 3 tons of, not tons, but I'm using tons in terms of like a measure, like, oh, it's 3 pounds, tons, whatever. A spaghetti, I use this many cans, I use that and that. Okay, cool. That's all she logged in, and she sends it off to whomever, and then they calculate the cost. Yeah, okay, that makes sense, but I don't think she would need access to HR's files for accounting how much spaghetti she made. I'm trying to make it see that it's kind of like that, HR's here and cafeteria leads here in terms of role access needs. Not saying they're not important, like it's important to have workers regardless. So VM hardening. I have not had you guys do hardening because I don't want you guys to break it. So I don't want you guys to delete your start menu. Like, oh no, I can't get the command prompt anymore. What am I gonna do? I have to spin up the whole VM again. Like, no. Hardening, I should say hardening, not harden VM configurations by disabling unnecessary services, ports, features, reducing the attack surface. So you kind of turn off ports, you can turn off services you don't need that are running, things like that. Features like Windows features you can shut off depending on what kind of VM you're running. With Linux, you can dabble a little more, shut ports off. It's the viral up differently in Linux as well. You may have seen that in some of the videos I've done. So encrypt sensitive data with VMs, and establish communication channels between VMs. So you can encrypt it by using hash tables, using SHA-256 encryption. That's the newest form of encryption. You need an encryption engine off the top of my head, if I remember right, because SHA-5 got hacked. SHA-32 got broken into, and 64, we went to 128, which is still useful, but now they're starting to break into 28, and 256 is the newest. It's encryption methods. So just trying to remember it. It's been a while since I've touched on it off the top of my head. So more strategies. Virtualization security tools. Select and deploy virtualization security tools based on your organization's needs. So it's everything you can deploy. Antivirus and anti-malware. It's pretty important still in this day and age, guys. Windows Defender ain't gonna cut it. I'm sorry. Use specialized antivirus and anti-malware solutions designed for virtualized environments to protect VMs from malicious software. Intrusion detection and prevention system, IDS or IPS, to monitor network traffic and detect and block suspicious activity and intrusions. You can lock them right at the port, turn the port off. Once the port's off, they lose their connection. How can they gain access? The connection's off. Exactly. Secure information and event management system, SIEMs. SIEMs tools collect and analyze security data for virtualized environments, aid in threat detection, and incident response compliance. So there's more, guys. I know this is somewhat deeper stuff. Security policy and trainings. It's kind of repeal training users and informing users and that fun stuff. Develop and enforce security policies for virtualizations. RBAC, role-based access control. Define and enforce RBAC policies to ensure that users and administrators have appropriate levels of access. God, RBAC sounds like a Pokemon, like a snake Pokemon. Sorry, like no mean to like trail off. It's clicking in my head. It's like I have to say this or I will not stop thinking about it. Some of you might get a laugh out of it. That's fine. Employ training and awareness, which I mentioned prior about informing users, teaching them, training them, sending them emails, et cetera, et cetera. Employee training and awareness. Conduct regular training sessions to educate personnel about virtualization security risks, best practices, and compliance requirements. Monitoring and auditing. Our old friend, auditing. Effective monitoring and auditing are critical components of virtualization security. Continuous monitoring. Implement real-time monitoring solutions to detect and respond to security incidents promptly. Security audits and compliance checks. Rarely conduct security audits to identify vulnerabilities, compliance issues, areas requiring improvement in virtualized environments. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the Active Directory portion of this stuff. So again, let me get some more water, guys, and I'll be right back. So let's talk about Active Directory security, or AD security here. At its core, Active Directory security is about enabling legitimate users to authenticate on the network and access the applications and data they need while protecting against anyone trying to access resources or LOA privileges they aren't authorized for. Active Directory effectively holds the keys to the kingdom by controlling authentication and authorization to most of an organization's on-premise applications and data. Therefore, Active Directory security is mission critical priority for your business or the business. Don't ask me why the book said it that way. I don't know. Different book I used, not the only class. What are the best practices for protecting Active Directory? I can't really give you examples, unfortunately, because I don't have too many. I can just give you, this is how you prevent stuff. So, unfortunately, that's what it is for Active Directory. I mean, there's poisoning, but I'm not getting into that. If you take a cybersecurity class with me, we can go that route, but not in here because I have to keep, it's kind of an intro class. Got to make it, tangible for you guys to get the concept. Don't want to, throw you on the deep into the pool, and then we're like, professor, you lost us at Kerberos keys. Yeah, no, man, I don't want to go that far. The key to preventing many of these issues rests with your ability to detect risky configurations and monitor for any accidental or malicious changes. On a fundamental level, reducing risk is about raising the barrier to entry for attackers, closing security holes before attackers can walk through them. By running regular security assessments, you can detect potential threats before they are exploited. A permission change on the admin SD holder object or a recent change to the default security description schema, by the way, can be signs of an ongoing attack. If those changes were not approved, an immediate alarm should sound. So you can have like monitoring software too that can scan and check every day or every 2 seconds or whatever it is. Implement effective password policy. Some of those passwords have been like a recurring thing for this. Like you have to have a good password policy. You have to have a strong password. It can't just be like, oh, cupcake123, look at me. That's a dictionary-based attack, brute force attack. Could break that. Like, and you know what? Give me a second. Let me find out. And I will bring it up on screen. Let me pause it. I'll bring it up. Here, I remember Bitwarden did this, so I pulled it up. Look, that's what I said right now, right? Cupcake123, look at me. Look how many days that is. 17. I'm just talking about password complexity. I'll get back into the slides, but this is why passwords are important. Look, I add exclamation point, it takes 5 years. I add a pound sign, it takes 21 years. I add backslash centuries because while these technically aren't in the dictionary, they have to be added into a software that would just keep throwing things out until it cracks it. It figures this out. It can figure this out, and it can even figure out the numbers. But once you start, I just messed with it. If I delete this and just call it cupcake123, look at that. That's not exactly friendly. Another one that I've seen, and I'll get back into the slides. It's just for you guys as entertainment. Let's put it that way. When I worked at Staples many years ago as an entry-level technician there, yes, I worked retail for like 4 years there. I worked retail for almost 10 years, but that's not the point of this. Someone once brought in their computer. At the time, I had to check it, and I had to log in as them, but they never left me the password. And they just put, a password question at the bottom. They put like a hint. I'm like, what's the strongest force in the universe? My brain just said, type in love. I typed in love and I gained access. And that's how long it would take someone to break in to get love. Now let's try cupcake then. 3, I'll add yeah, 6. If you're curious, you can play with this later. Just type in Bitwarden password strength in Google and it brings it up. So let's get back to the slides. On this story. Yes, I'm in Spanish. Don't worry. I'm not doing it because I'm being facetious. I'm sure where I am. So implement effective password policies. Protecting passwords and enforcing password complexity is critical as your first line of defense. Complex passwords should be at least 7 characters long and include numerals, both uppercase and lowercase characters, and non-alphanumeric characters such as exclamation points and $signs. Organizations should consider using the fine grained password policy feature instead of group policy objects to implement stricter rules. For example, policies can be created to apply different account lockout rules to specific sets of users on a single domain. So remember how you did the time restriction? You can also set it so after like 3 attempts, 2 attempts, it locks them out for like 15 minutes, or they have to contact an administrator to reset the password. That's not allowed. I'm going to have you guys do. I'm not going to make it. Just want you guys to take your final, take it easy. It's going to be a busy week for you guys. I'm sure I'm not the only class you have to worry about. So moving on, guys, 13 more slides to go through. Apply the principle of least privilege. So there is all for Active Directory, but it can kind of apply to everything else. I'm not rolling my eyes. I'm just going like, it kind of goes hand in hand. Following the principle, least privilege is essential to reducing your Active Directory attack surface, the various attack vectors your organization needs to guard against. This approach calls for all users, devices, and applications to be provided only the minimum number of level of permissions they need to function. Like I said, would the cafeteria lady need access to stuff from HR? No. So she shouldn't have rights to it. She should have access to like a basic computer login and a share folder where she drops off a file where she fills out how much stuff she used to make food. And then they can tally up how much she spent and counting with access to that, or her manager, then she sends it off or what have you. You got to figure out what your segmentation is called compartmentalization, like who's getting wet and who's only going where. You can't go any further, can't go here, can't go there. Big pictures we got to look at too in that sense. All right, whether improperly inherited, granted by accident or malicious action, or simply granted for expediency, fast, expediency. Excessive user permissions pose a direct security threat to your environment. You can give them admin by accident. It's happened. You right click on it and you enable and add them to the wrong group. I've seen it happen. We're all human, guys. But if the user, depending on how good their computer knowledge is, I'm not saying everyone's dumb, that's not the point. If they don't know what it means, they won't really break anything. They won't mess with it. But if you get someone that's like, oh, I studied computers, but I want to become a graphic artist or I want to become like an accountant, they can mess things up pretty quick because they're curious. Curiosity, right? Mother of invention, and it's also what killed the cat. So I'm not saying I want to hurt animals. I'm just saying as the phrase. Please don't take me to task for that. But curiosity gets the better of us. That's why we explore things. That's why we break our computers half the time. That's why our VMs sometimes crash because we made a change. I don't know what we did, and next thing you know, the VM is corrupted. I'm like, oh, cool, I'll spin up a new one. So, we live and learn. That's how it is. So, guys, moving on. Compliance Active Directory reconnaissance. So, the first step of any attack in general, any attack, be it phishing, be it what's the other one? Good Lord, brute force attacks, injection attacks, reconnaissance in general. Just don't even worry about the compliance Active Directory reconnaissance part. Just reconnaissance in general. Recon. You gotta find out what you're dealing with. Gotta find out what you're working with. Gotta find out where it is the least likely defended area. You don't just storm into a place and you maybe control something if you're attacking. I'm not saying I'm a hacker. That's just how it works. I bring up the MGM one because it's pretty famous now. But I guarantee you, they didn't just decide one day to wake up and like, oh, we're just gonna attack MGM today. Just call them. No, they had to look at the people who work there. They profiled the admins. They profiled network admins, system administrators. They figured out whose information they can get the easiest, and then they went through that route I mentioned prior, where they called, reset the password, gain control, and yada yada yada. Reconnaissance, recon, always. So, diving into it, going to the second part of this. Attackers often perform Active Directory lightweight directory access protocol (LDAP) reconnaissance. Jesus, that's a mouthful. To gain insight into the environment and continue their attack, Active Directory was designed to be an open book, preventing this reconnaissance difficult. However, by removing local administrator rights, and monitoring for suspicious LDAP requests, enterprises can complicate matters for attackers. Initially, by leveraging just-in-time provisioning and renaming organization units (OUs), you can limit the visibility of an attacker armed with legitimate accounts. So, accounting could have a code phrase like, what's that what you could say, bookkeeping or bean counter. I don't know if you've heard that before. Like the bean counter is downtown or something. That's also another phrase used for accountants. A lot of people wouldn't know that. HR, you could name, what else can you name for your research? You can name it people and culture. It's how you phrase something. IT, you can call them computer wizards. Let's give you an idea. Again, if you name something only people at your job would know, if you're a hip, cool new company and you have an AD and you want to be, I guess, just cool with the cool crowds. Hello, fellow children. How do you do? You can name it stuff like that. You could call, I'm trying to think of like another department, like research. You can call advances in development A&D instead of research. What the hell's advances? They're not going to, foreign agent, not agent like spy, but like an intruder is what I'm referring to. Like someone broken, like, what does this even mean? They wouldn't even understand it. Again, it's just how complex you make it, but people that can relate to it inside can understand it. You're cool. So they're good, rather not cool. So that's what it means by that visibility, by renaming. That's what I'm trying to give you as an example. So don't think I'm doing that for fun or anything. So retire legacy protocols. What do you mean protocols? Protocols get old. You probably heard me mention about Net Framework. Let me see. Let me pull it up over here. It's always fun. Let me pull up the Windows feature thing on my PC here. See this? Net Framework supersedes 2.0 and 3.0. 2.0 came out back in the days of Windows 98 second edition, and carried all the way through XP. Then it was replaced by 2.5, which we don't talk about. The 3.0 came out about halfway through XP's lifespan. Windows XP. Yes, I'm going back in time. I know. Just bear with me. I'm giving you a little history lesson. That's what we're talking about protocols. That can be considered an old protocol. It's still used on some applications. That's why 3.5 is there. That's still somewhat, I guess, viable. 3.5 has been around since like Windows 7 when that premiered and Vista and all that. And then it's 8. Then 4.8 is the newest framework. .NET framework for Microsoft. It's like a language, essentially what it is. And what's inside here, if you're curious, if you open this, it's just this kind of stuff. I don't have it installed because I don't use it, because you can also write stuff for it. I'm not going to. But it's referencing and saying retire stuff like this you don't need. Like once 3.5 becomes obsolete and we use 4.8, we'll probably move on to 5.0 and 4.8, which is fine. It'll be updated. But the problem is legacy software, like trying to figure out what runs on 3.5. I don't know if you've heard of this. I know some of you probably will. Be like, oh man, I haven't heard that in a while. OpenGL. OpenGL was an old graphic language that was used back in the day that would help render stuff on computers back when video cards were not even like above 64 megabytes of memory. 32 bits, you put OpenGL, it smooths it, makes it look nicer, and it would run on, I think, .NET 2.0, and it's still around. You can still install it because I know if you use Valve's Steam Engine, the original version of Steam Engine from the original version of Half-Life requires framework from what I recall. Top man, that's just from what I remember. So that's just an example. I don't have a physical picture of it, but I hope that makes sense. But that's a legacy protocol. So best practices call for eliminating legacy protocols such as TLS 1.0, 1.1, server message block version 1, SMB v1, digest authentication, and LAN manager, and NTL LAN manager version 1 and NTL LAN manager version 2. These protocols were not designed with today's threats and security needs in mind. This is more server related stuff and can form a weak point in your organization's defense. LTM v1 and v2, for example, are vulnerable to threats such as brute force, which I've talked about, man in the middle, which I mentioned, and organizations are advised to switch to Kerberos. That's the newest. They replaced essentially all values when you that. If you're curious about Kerberos, we can talk about it later. I can give you a little bit of slides on it. I have like 3 or 4 from somewhere else. And I'm not including in this because we're not talking about security that much, but in the sense of we're not going to go to the deep in security. We're just going to wade into the pool, get our feet wet a little bit. That's what I'm talking about. Before retiring these protocols, however, the Active Directory team should ensure that they fully understand how these protocols are used in the environment, to avoid breaking the functionality of any application in use. You don't want to break something by fixing. You don't want to fix something to break it, okay? Because then you make your life a headache. And you're like, oh man, I don't know what to do. So patch Active Directory vulnerabilities and insecure configurations. Vulnerabilities like the zero login CVE 2020-1472, that's the name of the bug, pose a significant risk to Active Directory if enterprises are behind in their patching. Due to Active Directory's criticality in your IT environment, patches should be prioritized, tested, and deployed as quickly as possible. You would have a VM spun up, you would deploy it to there and see if it broke anything. If it doesn't, cool. If it did, oh no. Hold on to your britches because it's going to be interesting. Attackers will look to strike known variables first. To reduce risk, enterprises should scan their systems regularly and prioritize patching vulnerabilities according to their severity and the potential impact on business operations if they're exploited. In addition, outdated software should be identified and updated as quickly as possible. So the thing about outdated software, and I'm scratching my head at it because the best example I can give you is college. And the reason I'm saying that is, yeah, I use Server 2016. Okay, it's ancient. Now, it's not even supported anymore by Microsoft, but it's free, so we use it to learn, right? Same thing with Windows 10. Technically, it's free because I have an OS copy of it, not that big of a deal. But other, classes, I'm not saying mine or anyone in here in general, like ESL classes, a lot of them like to stick to these, in the past, like to stick to these old 16-bit versions of software for teaching people how to read and write in English for ESL learners, which is great. I mean, it worked, but 16-bit was like, how many years ago? Everything at minimum is 32-bit or migrating to 64-bit or migrating to cloud. So how do you convince someone who's essentially stuck in their ways, they want to use this version of software? You're like, dude, I can't. Server doesn't even support hosting this. How do you support someone who wants to use 16-bit software? You can't anymore. You can virtualize it, yeah. You can make a virtual instance, but it's not exactly safe because it's so old. So you have to convince them to migrate to the newer stuff. And well, unfortunately, people stuck in their ways. Again, I'm not talking about anyone specific. I'm just talking about in general because I've ran into this. Get stuck in their ways and they don't want to learn the new system. So it's just something, again, you'd have to deal with at that point. But I'm just giving you an example of why you would patch vulnerabilities in general, like stuff like that on servers. So, okay. Possible. Talked about that. Sorry, I'm catching up to where I was. Going after low-hanging fruit does not stop with patching vulnerabilities. It also involves identifying insecure settings that grant users unneeded permissions or facilitate privilege escalation. Whether those configuration errors are due to neglect, accidental changes, or malicious actions, conducting periodic security assessments is necessary. So a big one was recently, I don't know how many years ago it is now, maybe a year or two, or maybe more, or it was discovered that when you add a printer from a print server that I showed you prior in this class, I think, or I showed in CS12, I don't remember. It prompted you for just an elevation, and you would just put your credentials, and you were allowed to add it. Well, apparently, it granted you admin for a good 10 minutes. That's why it got switched off and on the IT admins to approve any printer editions. So it makes your life a little harder. Moving on. So monitoring techniques for networks. Let's get into the network side of things. So I talked about AD and I talked about VMs prior. So now, pardon me, let's dive into the networking portion. Ping monitoring. Network pings are often one of the oldest monitoring techniques, but it is still widely used by NPMS today. The monitoring tool sends a packet or multiple packets to a node or device expecting to receive a response back. If the target node sends back an all clear message, the monitor knows the node is up and running. However, if no response is received, it sends out more pings to get the node's attention. If the pings node like computer or port. If these pings still turn up nothing, the monitoring tool alerts the user. Pings are a relatively simple monitoring technique, but are still a great way for enterprises to examine if devices are currently running. So remember how I had you guys try to ping your virtual machine, your server, or Linux? It's to see if they could talk. And that's essentially what you were doing. It's like ping monitoring. But you're getting a response, you know, oh, hey, it's alive. Oh, hey, it's there on the network. I can reach it. That was the whole point. So log file monitoring. Typically, devices on the network will generate log files as they operate. These log files provide basic information that the device cannot report on, including any errors. While it isn't as sophisticated as other techniques, some tools monitor log files to look for device reporting troubles. Log files are simple text files that might contain keywords such as error or critical. That signals a problem with the node. Monitoring tools look for these keywords and report on anything unusual. Let's keep going. SNMP monitoring. Most devices nowadays are complying with SNMP. So what does that mean? I don't remember. Let me figure it out. Give me a sec, guys. Sorry, I'm a moron. It says it right there. Simple Network Management Protocol. It's a device protocol that provides monitoring tools and nodes a common language to communicate with each other. They just simplify the networking between items essentially so they can kind of communicate easier, like IPv4, for example. This is more of a router-based thing and network-based in terms of like traffic and layers. So sorry, I kind of brain farted of that because it had it in there. The system relies on agents inside devices to provide information to network managers and monitor tools. An SNMP manager sends out polls to devices to inquire about the current status or a request, essentially. Like, hey, are you up? Yes, reply back with this. And devices can send traps when significant network events occur. NPMs that include SNPM monitoring have a common framework to talk to each other, centralizing and simplifying monitoring capabilities. NetFlow monitoring. NetFlow systems use packet traps to examine traffic that passes through a part of the network. So it's kind of like I guess like a bouncer, is the best I can put it. Like, you know, like going to a club, right? I was like, ID. Okay, you're going, okay, ID. Okay, oh, you're too young. No, go away. Or no, your ID is not good. Get out of here. Or we're at capacity. You got to wait. Kind of, they got to scan and check things. And so best idea I think was a bouncer. Why? I don't know, guys. Because the security card in the gate, I mean, that works too. The NetFlow probes captures traffic and then sends it to the monitoring tool for analysis. The analysis examines network traffic flow and volume to determine how data moves through the network. Flow-based monitoring systems include NetFlow, analyze the conversations between devices and ensure that data and information is traveling along the network path smoothly. SQL query monitoring. To monitor databases connected to a network, monitors can utilize SQL queries. These queries ask the database to provide information on the number of data requests, transmissions, etc. Using this information, a monitor can determine if the database is performing adequately or not. Ideally, the database should be sending data across the network to accommodate for every request it receives. If the database is performing slowly, the monitoring tool can detect it and inform the network team. Maybe we just reboot this. We'll start right at that point. Almost done, guys. 5 more slides. Monitoring techniques for systems. So let's talk about IT systems. So what is IT system monitoring? Put it simply, the term IT monitoring refers to any process and tools you use to determine if your organization's IT equipment and digital services are working properly. Monitoring helps to detect and help resolve problems, all sorts of problems. So let's talk about a couple techniques. Low-level infrastructure metrics. These are measured at the level of the host, server, network, and facilities, and include CPU, disk space, power, interface status, among others. So, you know, is it asleep? Is it awake? Is it logged in? Is it off? Is it not reachable? Things like that. Application metrics. These are measured at software levels to include response times, errors, rates, and resource uses, among others. So, you know, how much RAM is Chrome using on all machines? What's the average? Is Outlook taking up too much space? Is Outlook not syncing properly with the Excel Exchange server? Things like that. Service level metrics. These are infrastructure connectivity, application-based, service action-based, where applicable. So that just means how fast you respond through your tickets. I'm going to show you a ticket probably in a minute or two. So monitoring techniques for virtualization performance. The system one's really short because everything I'm going to talk about in virtual performance technically applies to regular systems. It's about the same, but again, they're both technically systems, right? They are systems, rather. One's real, it's intangible, and one is digital. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay, so what is virtualization monitoring? Virtualization monitoring is a process of monitoring and ensuring that the virtualization infrastructure is running optimally. It's a set of routine tasks that collect information and present them as key metrics for analysts, and technicians to detect issues and room for improvement. So this also applies to regular systems because you're going to do the same stuff. Here's what consists of the main 3 parts. Monitoring. It monitors the overall health of the virtual machine and virtual infrastructure and detects and isolates issues. Troubleshooting. It tries to troubleshoot issues that result in VM or physical devices not performing as it ideally should. Reporting. It reports valuable data regarding the performance to help achieve goals and take important business decisions. Do we scale more? Do we roll back? Things like that. And lastly, benefits of virtualization monitoring. Capacity planning. A virtual machine monitor can help admins to plan capacity better. Normally, these are intertwined with your regular system monitoring. If you get them as both, you can buy them that way. You configure it to read both. You get one that's virtualization, that one that's system. Hence why I didn't expand on system, because most of this stuff applies, right? I mean, you have to plan for capacity for virtual machines too, right? And physical machines. You have to plan the same thing. Better management. You can always manage them better. Instead of 4 users, do you want to do 3? Do you have enough machines to do 3? Do you have spare machines? Things like that. So anyways, capacity planning involves checking whether the server or resource capacity is adequate for the VMs and how much more capacity will be needed in the future. Always plan ahead. Plan 10% above what you have. It makes resource allocation within the virtual, better management. It makes resource allocation within the virtual environment much more efficient. No idle VM is taking up resources, barring others from using them. Infrastructure monitors can use the info to better manage resources. No server overload. At no time are the servers overloaded resource requests. If there are too many requests, too many VMs running, on a single server, the performance can slow down significantly. You will be down to like turtle speeds that you call. Like you would right click to make a new folder, right, on your desktop. It would take like 2-3 minutes to respond. You would know something's wrong at that point, though. Quality performance. Virtualization monitoring really improves the performance of virtualized infrastructure. It helps detect problems through key metrics about performance. So, guys, I mentioned this stuff before in the prior unit in Unit 5. I gave you more examples of it. This is a little bit more in depth of how and why it works, if that makes sense. Like, this is why we're doing it. That's what I wanted to cover here. I don't have to give you guys, softwares and the other one and all that of what they would use. This is what it's looking at. I hope that makes sense. So, guys, this is it for the first part of Unit 6. I will catch you guys in the second part, and then that's it. No more lecture from me. You don't get to see my floating head somewhere over here on the screen or whatnot. So, till then, guys, I will catch you in the next part of Unit 6. Take it easy.